I played Assassin's Creed Mirage at a closed Ubisoft event just a couple of weeks ago, and I have a lot of thoughts. I've been really excited to try this game ever since it was announced. The idea that they're going back to basics, trying to focus on social stealth again, tighter level design, enabling you to use parkour more than just running around or riding on a horse. And honestly, the map is bigger than I thought it would be. There are big open spaces as well as the tighter city areas. But every part of Mirage has been very intriguing to me as somebody who is a hardcore fan of Assassin's Creed and has been since I was a teenager. Oh wow, no, it's before I was a teenager. Like I was a preteen when I got into Assassin's Creed. Oh, that's trippy. Existential crises aside, I am pretty excited to talk about Mirage. And so when Ubisoft offered to sponsor me to try it at their event, I was like, gosh darn heck yeah, as long as I'm allowed to say whatever I think, whether it's positive or negative. And they said, absolutely. We want to show the game to you, let you show it to your audience. We hope that you like it. And to me, that's kind of the best thing that I can ask for a studio to sponsor me to look at their game and share it with my audience, but to also be so confident in it that they're willing to let me say whatever I want. I mean, that says a lot about their confidence in this title. So here we go. First things first, the recreation of Baghdad is colorful, vibrant, it is densely packed, and the rumors and speculation about increased NPC density seem to have been fully borne out. There's a lot more people walking the streets here with nowhere near as much pop-in as you would think, and they're all going about their daily activities, whether it's washing their face off in the river, or shopping in a market, or just speaking with friends, having a drink at a restaurant. This city feels really lived in a pretty cool way. It's also really cool to see Assassin's Creed return to the Middle East. It feels weirdly like going back home for the franchise. It just works, and I gotta say the densely packed streets work really well for the gameplay loop, much better than, in my opinion, big open fields like we had in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. In this case, the city streets are so densely packed together that parkouring up and down roofs and running over to another building, jumping across, or pole vaulting, all of that just works really fluidly because the city is so packed tightly together. And moments where I was able to navigate with little boats or riding on a camel were pretty cool, though I will say the city streets are so tightly packed that the camel never really felt viable, and I would guess it's mainly going to be used in the outskirts of the map, where you can see there are some deserted areas. It looks like maybe some enemy encampments, maybe some oases that you can explore and find. So I don't think these are for use in the cities. I think this is something you're going to be using when outside the city. Graphically, I think it's fair to say that this is on par with Assassin's Creed Valhalla. It doesn't really feel like they're doing a whole lot in addition to what was achieved before, and that's not a bad thing. Assassin's Creed Valhalla was a looker in a lot of ways, but if you're expecting this to be a 3 or 4 year jump in graphical fidelity, you shouldn't expect that. This was built with the same tool set as Valhalla, notably being initially ideated as an Assassin's Creed Valhalla DLC that was eventually born into this big standalone release. And so while I think it's a good looking game, it's just important to note that this is not going to be something that looks notably different than what we've seen before. Perhaps most significantly, these cutscenes that take place during conversations, they are markedly stiff and feel very similar to Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I don't think the facial animations are as fluid as I was hoping to see. I was hoping to see some improvements, but they're just as stiff as they were in Valhalla. Speaking of stiffness, though, the movement is a little tweaked from Valhalla. It does feel as though Basim runs with a little bit more weight. He navigates the city streets with more intentionality. It doesn't feel like he's just floating up and down surfaces. And free running largely feels similar to Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but it also has seen some moves added and some things tweaked, so it's a little different. But again, like anybody that was hoping that it would just be Assassin's Creed Unity ported to this, it's not. It plays like Assassin's Creed Valhalla set in the Middle East, at least in terms of movement, with a couple of small changes here and there, but it's not a big noticeable thing. What is very noticeable, of course, is the difference in setting. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, of course, you're running around in forests mostly, whereas in Mirage, you're actually exploring bazaars and you're exploring little markets within Baghdad. And in that capacity, it's really cool, and it lends itself to more vertical exploration while climbing and navigating that way, whereas Valhalla, you never really were encouraged to do that, because what are you going to climb? A tree? Okay. Now, in my time with the game, I got the chance to play a few different missions, in addition to the black box mission that finished out the demo. These missions were pretty varied, such as retrieving an item for another character that needed it since it was stolen from him before, at least that's what he told you. And of course, there's your typical assassination mission where you're tasked with going and finding the harbor master and then taking him out because he's been causing trouble for everybody else. And I will say I was pleasantly surprised with just how much they encouraged stealth as a tactic this time around. I mean, they've said that this was going to be a return to the series' origins, as it were, but it really is. Like, you can go in knives blazing, I guess, but every time I tried to do that, it did not end well whatsoever. You do have the ability to hire people to help you, just like in those old school Assassin's Creed games from years of old, such as hiring mercenaries to help you charge in or create distractions or something. And one thing to note, if I pause this here, you can see that it mentions power tokens. This is something that's kind of interesting. So the game features what are called Khidmah tokens, and these are currency that's spent to buy favors from different factions in the game, whether they be vendors or, in this case, mercenaries to help you create distractions, or another sub-faction that you can find while completing missions. These tokens can be discovered while out exploring and finding things of interest, or they can be given as rewards for side quests. And altogether, I actually think that they're a pretty cool addition because they encourage you to complete those side activities before taking on the main story stuff. Because if you have these tokens, you can do cool things in the main story quest lines, such as paying off vendors to give you information on an assassination target or give you access to some sort of cool point of entry that you wouldn't have access to otherwise. The first time I saw them, I was a little taken aback because I was like, oh, I need a separate currency to be able to recruit these guys. But I actually think that it works pretty well because it will encourage you to complete those side activities so you see more of the world instead of just sprinting through the main story. Granted, of course, if you want to just sprint through the main story, you can do that. Just like in this case, I'm not hiring those guys to help me create a distraction or cause some ruckus. I'm just going in and doing it myself. But as a result, this is going to be a little bit more difficult than if I had that token to pay those people off to help me. I will say there were a handful of times where I felt the AI was not as intelligent as I was expecting it to be, such as in this case where I rounded this corner and then attacked one guy. That clearly alerts everybody else that I'm here. This guy starts shooting arrows, but the other guy raises his sword and then starts looking around as if he has no idea what's going on when I've been chucking knives at his friends and he can hear them screaming. It was really, really weird, frankly, to see his just total lack of response. To be fair, this is a game that is not released yet. This is still in development, so it's not fair to hold it to a standard that we hold published games or released games to. This is still a work in progress, so it very well could have been that this was just a bug or some sort of issue with their line of sight, and this will be remedied by launch. I just wanted to point it out in case you saw it in the gameplay, and because I saw it, and that's kind of the point of this video. I think it's also important to note that the game really doesn't hold your hand hardly at all. In this case, I was tasked with going to this area and investigating this harbor master that's been causing some ruckus. This was done by going around collecting some notes and information on the target. And these notes were all centered in this one base where all of these enemies were hanging out. Now, I didn't know where these notes were, and they didn't really tell me. I had to go around exploring, looking through all the buildings, thinking to myself, where would they keep important documents in this little setup that they have? And then if I thought, oh, well, they'd probably have it in like the captain's quarters, which is probably like the nicer place to stay. So it's probably in the upper floor of one of these little houses that they're at and occupying. And sure enough, when I looked there, that's where the notes were. They also do something very similar to what they did in Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Valhalla, where they don't tell you exactly where a particular point of interest is, but rather they will describe it. They'll say it's on the east side of the city, next to the river, by an open gate, and maybe you can only see the target at nighttime. I think this is great because it actually encourages you to do some thinking for yourself instead of just blindly going to wherever the map marker is. I love it when games do this. It's one of my favorite ways of playing, say, The Witcher 3, is actually turning off the minimap and just listening to how characters describe the location you need to go to and playing that way. And frankly, it's really cool that characters in the world of Assassin's Creed Mirage, they'll tell you, go to this bridge on the south side of the city by the river, and you'll just look for a building with a red roof. Just like if they were talking to you in real life, describing this building to you, that's how they communicate it to Basim, and that's how they communicate it in turn to the player for you to navigate and find it for yourself. I think it's super awesome. It helps with immersion. It's frankly kind of fun, in my opinion, and it also encourages you to look around the maps much more carefully, which allows you to find points of entry, for example, that you wouldn't have found otherwise if you were just running to wherever the objective marker pointed you. And speaking of points of entry, I think this is probably a good time to bring up the variability of the quest design. There are a lot of ways to complete assassination missions in this game, and if you want to just go in there and get crazy, throw down a smoke bomb and try to take somebody out that way, you can do it. Or if you want to go super tactically, you can do that as well. In this case, I found my target and you can see he's right there. I swap over to the smoke bomb, throw it down, creates a little distraction, stuns him, and then I jump into the cloud and assassinate my target before getting out quickly. However, my demoist did tell me that there are myriad ways of taking on these assassination contracts that are perhaps more graceful than what I did, such as creating a distraction with the help of mercenaries that you hire so that all of the guards get pulled off of the target going to investigate that problem, and then you go in and assassinate the target when he's by himself. Or there's other things you can do, such as getting access to a very particular point of entry where perhaps the target is asleep, and then you can go in there and assassinate him if he's sleeping at that time of day, depending on when you start the mission. And for those wondering if melee is a valid or viable option this time around, sort of. I got in trouble a couple of times, and instead of assassinating somebody, I just ended up engaging them in melee, and the system is pretty simple. It's not that complicated, very similar to Valhalla, where there's a quick parry button with the left bumper, and then everything else is based on light or heavy attacks. Just like that, there's a parry, and then you go in and finish him once he's stunned. And I know there were a lot of people that were worried about melee and were questioning whether this was just going to be Valhalla light or something. And while I do think that they still have melee mechanics at the core of this, so if you get attacked or spotted, you can fight your way out, I do want to say that Basim is actually quite weak. He will die in just a couple of hits if you are not careful, and if somebody gets the whack at you, that didn't sound right. But the point is, Basim is weak. He is not a melee Viking brute or anything. He is an assassin, and that's what he's good at. So if you're going to play Mirage, you can get maybe through one or two guards with melee, but if the whole base descends on you, you're going to want to get out of there and reset. Because again, this game is about stealth. It's not actually about melee. While it is there, it's not what I would consider to be truly viable compared to the stealth mechanics that they've clearly put more focus into. But I would say stealth is only as good as the AI. And as you can see here, sometimes the AI performs really weird actions and don't behave quite right. I'm right in front of them in this case because I accidentally grabbed that pillar, and none of them really attack me. They all just kind of stand around, and then that guy up there by the door is just standing, and they just let me get away, and that's it. Yeah, these guards right here, you would think would have heard all the commotion and would be aggroed, but they're not. They just kind of take out their swords, turn around, and then give up looking for you and just kind of forget about it. It's just really weird. But again, this game is a work in progress. It very well could be fixed by the time the game comes out. My fingers are crossed. It's probably also worth mentioning the skill tree that they give you. There are a bunch of options here. It's tied into the Phantom, Trickster, and Predator skill trees. These basically focus on your typical assassination abilities, chain attacks, that sort of thing. Trickster would be your tools and abilities such as your smoke weapons or throwing knives. And then the Predator is things like using the eagle sense, as you can see on screen, to detect enemies or tag them and pin them so you know where they are as you navigate the base. It is the polar opposite of Assassin's Creed Valhalla's skill tree, which was basically a bush, and I'm here for it, frankly. I think this is refreshing. It's something you can look at and understand. Oh, an ability that gives me another slot for tools. Cool, I understand that. Or, ooh, cool, I can now perform 2 takedowns instead of just 1. Awesome. Those kinds of things are awesome, and I love it compared to the like plus 1.9% damage on short range attacks that we got in Valhalla. And everybody was asking, yes, the camels can swim, and frankly, they're really cute when they're doing it. So there's that. As for the black box mission that ended the demo, that was kind of the whole point we were there. This was actually pretty impressive. It was set in a bazaar where a bunch of shops were located, and we had to find the target, who was located within and had her identity concealed. So in order to do this, we have to look for a bunch of information. We have to gather intel on the treasurer target to figure out who she is, where she is, and how we should best take her down. And this was initially a little daunting because it just starts like this. They don't give you any information other than go figure it out, and you have to do just that. It was frankly pretty cool to just go around and try to find clues and gather information on a target without any sort of clear guide. It's just you figure it out. The developers trust you enough to use your brain and put two and two together. And I kind of love that, honestly. It's the opposite of hand-holding, and I think it's really, really cool, especially in a game about deduction and stealth. I think it's great to do that. I mean, after all, the whole point of these games is to try and take out the targets as stealthily as possible, and a lot of the time that includes finding interesting routes or doing things in a creative way to get the desired result. And I think the best way to do that is to just empower the player with the correct tools and just let them figure it out themselves. And it was really cool, frankly, to come upstairs looking around, hear a couple of people talking and realize they're talking about the treasurer, and then just take a seat on the bench and listen. Again, social stealth, nothing too crazy. We're not running around with Viking spears or hammers or axes. We're just sitting and listening, and it actually feels pretty nice. And in an homage to old school Assassin's Creed games, there actually was a trailing mission, just like in the good old days of AC2 and Black Flag and all those, where you have to follow these people trailing, listening as they go, and then sitting on a bench outside their little quarters so that you can hear what they're talking about. I thought this was just kind of a fun little touch, little throwback, and I thought it was fun. I mean, it made me smile. As I collected all sorts of different clues, I learned more information about the target, and while I was hoping that perhaps I could try to take on the mission without having completed all the clues, it doesn't seem like this is actually possible, at least not in this mission. You do need to collect all of the clues before progressing. This isn't one of those things where, like, in a subsequent run through, you can just go straight to where you think the target is and take them out, and then it's easy peasy. You got lucky, when in reality you just had the extra information. In this case, it seems like you actually do have to get all the clues in order to trigger the spawn of the target and be able to take them out. And in some cases, there were cool options for the player, such as right here, where I'm given the opportunity to bid on an item, or I can just do nothing. And this would totally change how the last moments of this quest play out, how I take on the target, how the target looks at me if I were to go and meet her and try to negotiate how to properly handle this or to get her defenses down before taking her out. There were a lot of little things like this where you have the option to just throw things into a little bit of chaos, and I kind of love it. Not to mention, again, that by asking the player to have 150 of the dirham currency, that is something you're only going to have if you have been completing side objectives or haven't been spending it on upgrades and things like that. And so this is once again a way that they can encourage you to complete side activities before taking on the main quest. And I think that that's generally a good thing, because overwhelmingly all of the surveys and data shows that people will complete the main story, and in general they just move on from the game and never go back to the side stuff. There are some people that finish the main story then do side stuff, but they are in the minority. The vast majority of people that complete main story stuff first just end up putting the controller down once the credits roll. So I think it's a good thing to see games that encourage you to complete that side stuff before credits roll, so that at the very least they see it. But okay, all told, what are my thoughts on Assassin's Creed Mirage after trying it? To be completely honest, I like it. I was actually kind of surprised at how good it felt just to be back in a simplistic Assassin's Creed game. And I need to be clear about that. This is not on the scale of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. This is not trying to be. That's why it's priced cheaper than those games. Rather, this game is trying to offer you something a little bit different. It's trying to give you an old school Assassin's Creed game that you can play and enjoy. And in that capacity, I think it does a pretty good job. It does feel in a lot of ways like a 2012 game in terms of structure, But in this weird case, I don't think that's actually a bad thing. Like, yeah, it feels old school, but that's the point, you know? Like the trailing mission or how they structure the main story stuff. All of this might feel a little out of date, and that's because frankly it is, but that's okay. They wanted to give you a game that takes you back to old school Assassin's Creed titles, that makes you feel like a teenager again, and in that capacity I think they're actually pretty successful. I also feel like in general I only scratched the surface of what the game has to offer in terms of combat or stealth variability, and the city itself is massive and is beautiful and is dense, and I can't wait to explore it more when the game officially releases in early October. But let me know what you think of Assassin's Creed Mirage. After seeing all of this stuff and hearing my thoughts, I'm very interested in your thoughts. I think the game feels really good to play. I think it's tight, it's relatively polished, and frankly, I am very excited to see the final product. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. Again, thank you to Ubisoft for hooking me up for this opportunity. It's awesome and very generous of them to do that. And as always, thank you for watching. I love you all dearly. Stay safe. I'll see you in the next one. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.